Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Let's Keep Talking. This is episode almost 70, if not 70 already. And damn, do we have an interesting conversation today with Angel DeSantis. Angel is someone I discovered on YouTube as I was looking into religious trauma syndrome, which is the ongoing psychological effects of someone being raised in an authoritarian, dogmatic belief structure. Authoritarian, dogmatic religion. I think I have that note somewhere. Yes. Religious trauma syndrome is the condition experienced by people who are leaving an authoritarian, dogmatic religion and coping with the damage of indoctrination. And indoctrination, as we learned a few episodes ago, is being taught to accept beliefs uncritically, not being taught to think critically. So I was looking into religious trauma syndrome and I discovered this awesome YouTuber named Angel. And Angel was talking about how to begin to connect to God, how to begin to connect to the divine, how to build your own relationship with God, and how to heal from the difficult experience of going through indoctrination. Come to find out, she was raised in a sex cult called the Children of God. Born in China, moved to Japan, then moved to the US, spent the first 23 years of her life in a sex cult called the Children of God. An apocalyptic cult. It was always the end of the world. She lived in a house with 100 other people and then broke free when she was 23 years old. She is, I think she's almost 40 now because she said she's been out of it for 15-ish years. So yeah, that would be about 40. And she's spent the last nearly 2 decades undoing the trauma of being brainwashed, indoctrinated to the highest degree, filled with fear, told who God is, and she has built such a heroic and admirable and amazing mind for herself and connection, channel to God, to divinity, in a way that is empowering to her and not authoritarian and owned by somebody else. I know that no one else listening to this episode, maybe 1 or 2 people, I don't know, hey, what's up, how you doing? I don't think anyone else who's tuning into this episode today was raised in a cult of this degree. And if you are, oh my God. But all of us can learn from this story that we're going to share today. All of us can learn from Angel's experience. There's something called, I think, the Regents Beta paradox, which is where you might be better off if you were worse. You know, if your financial situation was worse off, then you might be motivated enough to fix it, or your health or your relationship, etc. That sometimes something being just bad enough, or just being bad, but it's manageable. It's kind of a worse off situation than if it was worse. So you would actually do something about it. Does that make sense? She is a prime example of that, where this experience she has taken and turned into a superpower. She's taken this experience and turned it into a superpower because the amount of waking up as an individual she's done in her life surpasses anyone else that I've ever talked to, ever. So anyways, we talked all about that experience. We talked about getting out of the cult. We talked about learning how to think for herself. And then we talked about her doing ayahuasca and mushroom and MDMA ceremonies and ketamine ceremonies. And we talked about psychedelic therapy. Anyways, without further ado, here's my wonderful conversation with Angel DeSantis. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Don't forget to rate the show and subscribe and like the video and all the other stuff. Help a brother out. Let's hop into it. I'd love to start out with just talking about your story and giving everyone else some context that I have as I've consumed a lot of your YouTube videos, just about Angel and growing up in this cult and what the experience was like, and we can go from there.
Okay. Do you want me to start or you start?
Yeah, go for it. I'd love to hear about it. Just where does it begin?
Okay, so for me, it began in China. I was born to parents who were already inside of the Children of God. Um, and they had joined in Indonesia and in Texas. They had both ended up in Indonesia. And then they went to China and had me. Um, and then they ended up moving to Japan because my mom is a Chinese national. And at that time, they had just implemented, I think, the one child rule. And I was her second. And so she was going to be reported. So
Yo,
they
so they
fled.
were gonna have to boot you?
I don't know who they would have to boot or if she was going to go to jail. I don't know. But one of her neighbors told her that like, hey, our other neighbor who we hate is going to the police now to tell on you. So then my parents ended up moving to Japan and they had six more children. So it's a good thing they left. But all of this was within the Children of God. And so I grew up in communes across Japan and then moved to the US when I was 19 for
Okay.
my last few communes between the US and Mexico. And then, yeah, ended up leaving late, like late 2008, I believe.
Mm.
Um, and it's been a journey since of
Yeah.
going out into the world and not knowing anybody in the world or how the world works because you're just taught that like the world is a terrible place. Everyone is against you. Everyone's going to hate you and fight you. And
Yeah.
so out into the world with that sort of mindset and understanding. And slowly over the course of the last however many years, just peeling the layers of that and the path of autonomy and self-discovery and starting to read books that weren't cult books and starting to consume. Yeah, exactly. Finding out about like,
Music and TV shows and shit that doesn't come from your religious leader.
exactly. So just sort of opening to this new world and really finding that like really honestly what you believe is what you find evidence for. So when I
Mm.
believed that everyone in the world was against me and people were bad people, it's like I worked for very terrible employers and I had bad experiences. And then as my world starts to expand and I expect different things and I expect people to be good and I expect good experiences, then I start to steer towards that. And as I realize that I am capable of learning and understanding different things, then I see myself expand in all these different ways. So it's been like quite the trip.
Yeah. How old were you when you left the cult?
I was 23.
Okay. And then can you tell us more what's going on in this cult?
So this was a apocalyptical cult. So it was always the end of the world. And what they told me, my understanding of the quality of my life and the value of my life
Since
was that I
birth.
was since birth. Yes, is that I was a soldier. So I was a soldier in the Lord's end time army because it was the end of the world. And my job would be to seduce soldiers and kill them and be able to last through the tribulation. So there's 7 years of war. Well, there's once the Antichrist arises, there's 3.5 years of peace, and then there's 3.5 years of war. And so we were being trained to get through that 3.5 years of war. So we were taught to be like psychologically, like they're going to torture you, they're going to gang rape you, they're going to do all this stuff. So as like a 5-year-old, I'm trying to like mentally prepare for being raped by soldiers. And those were the stories that they would read us to sleep in.
Did they
And
tell?
that,
So they at 5 years old. I'm sorry to interject. I just want to make sure that I got. So at 5 years old, they're like, "Hey, little one, sit around. Like, do you know what rape is? Like, it's coming." Oh
well,
my
they weren't
god.
even saying, you know what it is. It's just like it was in the bedtime stories they would read us because
Oh,
they
it's like
had
this
their own.
is who you're meant to be. This is who you're going to be for God.
Yes.
And they're doing
So
such
like,
a good thing. They're like luring in these men, and they're helping out
exactly.
God's army.
Right. You're using your seductive powers to seduce men, like for God. Um, and then also preparing you for your whole family to die. So I would be worried that, my sisters and my brothers and my mom, and like I would never see them again. But they also separated you in the cult. So I didn't grow up with my mom and dad. My dad wasn't really in my life until we got into smaller communes when I was like 11.
Are your parents still
But
in the cult?
my dad is still part, but everyone else in my family is out, which is
Were you the
nice.
first to go?
No, I was second. And then,
Who
yeah,
who went
yeah.
first?
My older sister left first.
And she was like, "You got to get out here, man. It's great."
So she left, and then they had us cut contact. And so, like, I knew she was out there, and I like hoped she was doing well, but also it was like every man for themselves. So, and she was also on the East Coast. So when I left, I was West Coast. So I left with my husband, and it was just the two of us. Um,
Did you meet your
but yeah,
husband in the cult?
I did. I met him the day that I landed in the U.S. He was in the same commune.
And you were
Yeah,
23 years old.
I met him when I was 19.
Did he know of your purpose of seducing soldiers and was okay with it?
My That's just what I'm born for. But no, so that was purpose, and then also having as many children as possible, which I think that you see also now with any high control state that treats human lives as if they are very dispensable. They encourage the women to have as many children as possible. And so that was my job. And when I was 11, they took me. They had us do self study for math and English because we had to read all the cult literature, and then like basic math. And once I got to division, they were like, you don't need to learn anymore because like you're about to enter like childbearing years, and so you just need to learn how to cook and clean and like raise children. So they put me on childcare duty, and I would every day it would be like I would wake up and be like, okay, we're not dead. And really,
We're not
because
dead. Okay, we're not dead. Like we
so
made it
like
another day kind of thing.
another day
So
because
you
you
were kind
never
of
know.
you were like living every day like it was your last.
And but it's the interesting thing is that your brain doesn't develop to see time. So anyone who grows up in these very high stress environments like war zones or anything like that, your brain develops in a very different capacity. So
Hmm.
when I would talk to people and they would be like, well, college and then 4 years, and I would be like, 4 years, like what do you even mean? Like it just
Yeah.
your brain doesn't develop past like 48
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, we're not about like planning and being we're like survival. It's all that we're talking about here.
It's very hand to mouth. So every day it would be wake up, clean the house, take care of the kids, cook for the commune, go to bed. And it's the same cycle every day, but there's no, I don't think that's weird because I don't see past 24, 48 hours in my mind. And
Yeah.
so everyone that is raised in this way with these mindsets, and they don't give you any sort of, they are in charge of 100% of your intake. And so every little bit of information that you have is set up so that you don't see any evidence to the contrary of what they're telling you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's a very interesting sort of endless loop to be in. And that was the everyday.
The communes. You guys were living in communes. What do you mean?
So it's a communal living space. And there were combo homes when I was growing up. And the combo homes were like between like 60 to 100 people. And basically we would get plots of land or abandoned houses outside of town. And then we would just all live in there. And then we would bus into town to do the begging because they would make the kids beg. That's how they paid their rent because nobody had jobs.
Wait. So hold on. Let me get my facts straight on this. So you're born in China, go to Japan because you don't want to get sliced and diced. You move from Japan to the U.S. What part of the U.S.?
So I moved from Japan to the U.S. at 19. So by the time I was 19, there were smaller homes. We weren't allowed to go past 36 people because then the authorities would find you. Because the authorities had found the big communes and they had started raiding them because they were like, you guys can't abuse children. And so they had started taking children and putting them in foster care. So then that's when they changed the rules to be like, okay, everyone break into smaller homes. Like you can't go above 36.
I have 23.
To San Diego when I was 19.
Oh, cool. San Diego. Awesome. I have 23 written down. Was 23 you got married? What was 23?
That was when I left and got married.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay, so when you're in Japan and then when you move over here to the U.S., was that whole time, like both cases, you were living in like groups of tens of people, like a community?
Yeah, so I lived in combo homes, so like the big ones. I think the ones that I lived in for the longest time had 93 people.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and then we moved into the smaller, the 36 to 38 people. Um, when I was like 11 or 12, went into smaller communes and then moved to communes in the US that were also like 40-ish people. Um, and then Mexico, same amount of people, and then left when I was 23. So I had never lived. And then when I went from that just to an apartment with my husband, it was just him and I just remember just being like, I don't even understand this. I don't
Yeah.
understand that there's one other person here.
When when you and your husband got married at 23 and left, were you guys already involved prior to leaving and getting married? Was he like in the same house?
Yeah, so we met in the same commune. Um, we had like a little back and forth for a while, but then he wanted to go to college, and you're not allowed to have any sort of higher education. And so he had to leave. And he
What?
asked me to stay with him. Oh yeah. I mean, of course, these cults don't
No,
like education.
no, yeah, I'm totally with that. I was gonna say, what's the like amount of time you spend outside the like geographical territory of the Colts ownership? Do you go to Winn Dixie? Do you go to Walmart with someone to get eggs?
Yes, to Walmart. Um, yeah, so they had people who would do that. So they divided it into, because I mean these things, by the time it started in 1969, so at this point it's like the 2000s, so they have it down pat. So there were certain people who would just like very rarely leave the house unless we were going to like do a park day. But there were people who were like the home shoppers who would
Mm.
go out to Costco and do a Costco run. There were people who were like, when I was in San Diego, we had an office, because we were, laundering money, through a 501c3. So we had people who would go to the office. And then there were like the child care workers or the cooks and people that stayed at the house. So people had different jobs. Um, and then, for example, when I was in the combo homes, I would be on site through the week and then go out on the weekend and beg. And then when I was in
Where
the
would you go
small,
beg? You would just go to like a local store and just hang out outside front like as a kid and be like, "Yo, hey, can I get some change? We're
they
trying to
would
get
take us,
food."
they would bus us into the city. Um, and then we would go to these like malls or big stoplights, like in Japan, crosswalks. You have to go to places where people are still. So we would go to these really big crossings, and the light would be like 2 minutes long or something like that. So you would have 2 minutes to run through and hit as many people as possible, and just be like, "Hey, we're missionaries. Can you give us some money?" Um,
That's got to be such a unique experience to like to see with your eyes, like there's something going on out here. People are just moving about. Like this is
yeah,
full of commotion. Everything's happening, but this is not what we participate in. This is not what we're involved in.
yeah, because they are systemites. Like those people are the people who have the veil over their eyes. They don't know that the end of the world is coming. So how
They're systemites.
they're systemites. They're part of the system.
When you and what's your husband's name?
Oh, we're divorced, ex-husband. But
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay. I was gonna say, did you guys ever use that as like a an insult? Be like, you fucking systemite, like when you guys got mad at each other.
Oh no, not when we got mad at each other. It's more like a funny thing, and like I would be like, "Oh, buying new socks," and I would hashtag like just systemite things. Right? So it's like stuff like that, where it's like
Oh my god, it's a way of life, man. Systemitis. I love it. It's how to live.
being able to keep the money from your paycheck, like just systemite things.
So
Um,
what happened with the husband? Did you guys
um,
was it just a normal breaking apart or was it cult related, systemite related? What was it?
I mean, I think that there were a lot of things working against us, obviously,
Mhm.
because we both grew up in a cult and we both came from a lot of trauma. And when we got out, um, the whole basis, like when you grow up in a really high stress environment, nobody has time for your feelings. Your feelings are bullshit. Like, oh, are you sad? Well, guess what? The end of the world is almost here. So, like, suck it up. And so that's always that sort of thing. And I think also in society, that's sort of what society tells men. Like, oh, are you sad? Guess what? Nobody cares. Suck it up. And so, as I was trying to process like what had happened to me, his way of helping me was like, "Oh, are you sad? Suck it up."
Yeah.
And
He just
as
kind
I
of
was,
like just white labeled the advice given from the
yeah.
world and called it helpful friendship advice.
And so, as I'm starting to enter healing like communities, and as I'm starting to make friends and tell them my story, and receive such empathy and love, and people being like, "Oh, that shouldn't have happened," or like, "Here, see my therapist," or "Do you need a hug?" And like starting to be around healthy people, then I began to see how unhealthy my marriage was. And the thing is that coming from the cult, we had such a good relationship for coming from a cult. And
Yeah.
then once you take that into the real world, then it's like your husband is supposed to like listen to you or like
Yeah. Now you're like, wait a second.
take care of himself. And it's like things like that. And then realizing like I am still carrying a lot of stuff with me that I am unable to work through because I am still attached to this person who hasn't seen the need to detach from the thing that we came from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and so it was a very natural falling away. It was a very like painful thing to go through, and then also to realize like I'm really on my own then once I get divorced
Hmm.
because then I don't have the partner who, you know, did do his best to understand what I was going through and who understands my background. And now I have to go into the world just alone. And, I'd never dated before. I had not ever, like, none of those things had ever crossed my mind. And so, like, stepping out into the world just fully alone um, was a difficult thing, but it was better than staying in the marriage.
Yeah.
And so that is how that went. But it's very good now, and we have a good relationship now. He's very happily remarried and is a very good husband to his current wife, and we talk every once in a while, and are very grateful for each other because I don't think either of us would have been able to leave without each other. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
really
100%. That relationship served a great purpose for you at that time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I want to say that I think you rock. Really. I mean, you're like a hero, man. Seriously. It almost makes me emotional just saying it because you fucking rock, dude. You have such a fucking cool, you have such an inspirational story of empowerment. Like, it is amazing to listen to you talk about this and then like just to see someone who anyone on a healing journey of sorts is in a difficult space, constantly opening yourself and looking inside and opening yourself and looking inside and opening yourself. That's hard enough as is for anyone, but to come from where you came from, oh my God, that's incredible.
Thank you. I have my premise now, which I will interject, and I really believe that the hero's journey is an archetypal journey that we all need to take in our lives. Like our
Mm.
purpose and here is to take the hero's journey and rescue ourselves from whatever circumstances that we are born into and to find ourselves like that divine spark inside of us and draw it out and guide it home. And
Yeah.
so that is really, yeah, that is what I feel like I have been able to do for myself. And I'm still on that journey. And it's always so wonderful to see other people who are on their own, like hero's journey.
Yeah. I know this might be a weird question, but do you think in a way that you are at a like a huge advantage because of the experience you grew up with because like the what's the regions beta paradox, which is like you'd be better off if it was worse. Like
Mm-hmm.
you would do something. Most people live as a result of dogmatic, programming their entire life and never break away, but yours was so bad, you're like, fuck this shit, I'm out, and look at you.
Yeah. So, I mean, it takes a while to get here because, of course, there are so many years where I'm like, my life is terrible. Why did this happen to me? I don't deserve this. I'm a good person. Um, and then walking far enough into the journey to look back and be like, I wouldn't change anything. I would leave it exactly as it is. And I wouldn't change a thing
Wow.
because I have learned so, so much. And what a privilege it is to see how capable I am and to have rescued myself over and over and to have grown. Really, I believe we come as seeds, and seeds grow, but they need fertile ground. And so to see that I can be the seed and the ground and I can water, I think is really amazing, to the point that like I feel very blessed a lot. And again, it takes a while to walk yourself from why did this happen to me to I'm so glad that everything happened as it did. But I mean, it's a worthy journey to take because then every single day is such a blessing.
Well, what was that transition like? What were some of the nuances of it from victimhood of why the fuck did this happen to me and this is so stupid and I don't even know who Chris Brown or Rihanna is or what
Right.
the MTV is. I don't even know it. Why have I missed out? To then going like, wait a second, this is the hero's journey. This is me discovering myself, and this is the most beautiful opportunity ever. How did that begin to happen, and what was that like?
So it's such a brick by brick thing. And it's like how to walk 20 miles. It's super simple. You just start walking.
You get in a
Um,
car.
you're like,
You
no,
don't.
God. Um,
Wrong. You do not get.
I do it. But it's so simple. It's one step in front of the other and you get to your destination. But I think what I had expected at the start of the journey was that there would be an aha moment where I would get to the thing and I would be like, oh, this is my magic moment. And now everything is healed and nothing will ever come up again. As opposed to like, it is a structure that you are building. And when you build a structure, it's like, first you start with it. It's like a tear down of a house. Like you get a really shitty structure and a really shitty house and the whole thing has to be torn down. But you can't tear the whole thing down unless you have like a little shelter to be underneath. Otherwise, you're going to be exposed to the elements. So it's like,
Yeah.
it starts with that. Like, what's my little shelter? And it was being by myself because I felt very safe alone and finding stoicism. I think if I didn't find stoicism, I don't think I could have had the like mini structure to keep myself safe. But I found logical thought. And that was incredible to me because all of my thoughts were very purposely created to be very confusing so that I would be easier to control. But once I found logical thought and I realized I could, if somebody told me something or if I wasn't sure, I could ask, is it true and is it useful? And if thoughts were true and useful, then I could hang on to them. And that was my tiny little structure that I got into. And then I just tore the whole thing down. And then you build brick by brick. But one thing that was very paramount to me as I was building myself up is I was in this place. I used to ask, why me? And then I started asking, why not me? And I thought, well, other people have degrees or other people have healthy relationships or other people have. And then I started asking, well, why not me? And then I realized, oh, that's a really nice life hack because when I ask why not me, there's no reason. And then I can start actually, this person has a well-paying job. Well, why not me? Like, why can't I go get that? And so I put my brain in this loop of asking, whenever it would ask why, I would ask why not? And it had been working. And I had been finding ways to like empower myself to go after the things that I wanted through that loop. And then one evening I was just like in a bad place and I thought about, like some of the darker times in my life and some of the abuse. And I thought, God, why me? And my brain went, well, why not you? And I was like, what? Because the loop was still running. And I was like, why not me? Well, because I'm a good person and because this and I don't deserve that. And then I was like, well, if it has to be someone who who could take it instead of me, because like if this thing had to happen, which it does all the time, I was like, well, if it's not me, then who? Like, who would I give it to? And then sort of realizing like it really shouldn't go to anyone. There really is not. There's no reason why it shouldn't have been me. And it happened to me because I was there, and
Yeah,
that's
it
really,
just happened.
yeah. And I couldn't find a good enough reason why it shouldn't have been me, because like, well, I'm a good person. Well, everyone has what I have. People are generally good. No
Yeah.
child does that. And so I really couldn't come up with a reason why it shouldn't be me. I also couldn't come up with a reason why it should, but I thought, well, maybe, at least I'm strong, and it's something that I believe I can overcome. And then I thought, well, maybe then this is why it happened, because I am capable of overcoming. So let me just hold on to that for dear life and try and walk forward.
So first you asked yourself, why me? Oh God, why me? And then you said, why not me? I could take this on. And then it turned into neither or. It was just like, well, it is what it is. Maybe there's no reason it happened or didn't happen, but now what do I do?
Exactly. And then it sort of starts catching you up to, well, now we're present. Because what trauma does is it keeps you
Yeah.
in the past, you know? And as you work through trauma, all you're really doing is trying to catch yourself up to this current moment. So
Do
then
you
when I'm
feel
in
like,
this, go ahead.
sorry, do you feel like the why not me thing is a good step, but not a good place to stay?
Yes. So I really believe that it's all about steps moving forward. Nowhere is a good place to stay. Forward motion is the place to stay. There is not a place that you want to get to where you're like, okay, now I understand everything. I'm going to park here. You always like camp for the night, keep going. There's always something in front of you that will help you when you look back to see the picture in a more nuanced way. So you do always want to keep moving. The moment that you think you're done is the moment the picture starts to blur,
Yeah,
and
it
you
gets
start to,
stale and weird
yeah, it starts to really distort because you
because
think that you have the picture.
you only had the picture then. That was the picture then. Like looking out looking out your window. It always changes. It's always different, and you have
Absolutely.
wisdom or spiritual practices being willing to look out the window and see what's out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know where we were. We were in the middle of something.
We're about moving from why me to why not me to seeing what it really is and always moving forward.
So trauma keeps you like trapped in the past. And I think that as you're willing to ask questions that are neither disempowering or empowering, they're just questions.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
I ask you a question, naturally you're going to rack your brain for an answer. Like if I ask you, is there such a thing as a frog that is blue and yellow? Like naturally your brain is going to start filtering. Like, is there? Do I know? Like maybe in the Amazon. And so there's something inside of you that can be called up. And so once I figured that out, I was like, let me just ask myself a bunch of questions and not get too attached to the answer, but see if I can get more information for a more well rounded answer. And that started a whole thing for me of like, can I do this thing? And it's like, yes and no. And do I want to do this thing? Why do I want to do it? Why don't I want to do it? What are the reasons that I do and I don't? And who do I think will be for me or against me and why? And so starting to walk myself into this sort of psychological journey of like, what are my beliefs and what are my thought patterns? And again, back to that stoic, like filter that I created for myself. Like, are these thoughts true and useful, or are
yeah.
they simply thoughts that I believe? Because those are all different things. And so starting to really parse out all these different aspects of my life and be able to deconstruct or reconstruct them as necessary, as long as they are helping me farther along my journey.
You rock. You know that, right?
It's made sense to me. So I'm
Hmm.
glad that it's worked.
Why did you leave? Why did it get so bad you left? Why was it like, oh fuck this shit, I'm out? What happened?
For which one? For cults or marriage or both?
Colt.
So I never wanted to leave. And that was something that I had to struggle with later of like, why didn't I know? Um, because it's all you know. And I was told that this was the best that it gets. And
Yeah.
I believed that because I wasn't allowed evidence to the contrary. So when it came time to leave, I left because I didn't want my boyfriend at the time. I didn't want him to be alone. And I thought that I would be safe
Mm,
with him. There was, you know, how like we have the things that we think and we have the things that we're told. And underneath that is a self.
yeah.
And I knew that I wasn't supposed to leave. I knew that God would come for me if I left. I had all this stuff that I thought that I knew. But when I really sat down and I was quiet and I thought, what do I want to do? I knew that I wanted to go. And it was the first time I sort of heard that like inner voice. And I knew that I wasn't wrong. And so I left because I wanted to be with him. I didn't want him to be alone. And I wanted to start a life together. Still not being able to see time and still like just the whole thing was not good. But I knew it was the thing to do. And so that's how I didn't think that what I was in was bad. I didn't think that what I was in was a cult because, nobody joins a cult. You join a movement. And
Yeah.
so it was only after a few years that I was able, like, and also in talking to people and hearing other people talk and being like, was what I grew up in wrong? It's like after you get more information, then you can look at the thing. But it took me a while before I realized that what I had grown up in was incorrect.
Let's talk about religious trauma syndrome.
Hmm.
Regardless of if you're listening to this, what's up? How you doing? Thanks for tuning in. If you grew up in a cult with Angel, then you recognize Angel. But if you grew up in any if well, we all grow up and adopt these dogmatic belief structures. Some people it's through just traditional religion. And there's other ways, but let's stay the conversation on the religious aspect of it, because a lot of people, myself included, have come out of being brought up in a certain religion, being told this is who God is. And God is such a powerful word because it's like this is the number one biggest thing to orient yourself towards in life. This is who God is. And I know there's a lot of people, Angel, that could benefit from hearing you talk about identifying religious trauma syndrome in your life, what it is, and how to begin to grapple with it and make and apply some of the breakthroughs to make your life more free and beautiful.
Yeah. Um, I think this topic is very, very nuanced. The first thing that I will say is that religious trauma has nothing to do with God. And I think that that is a very, very important piece. Um, but religious trauma generally has to do with how we were taught to view God and the role that God plays in our life. Um, and so the premise of religious trauma is that you are inherently wrong and the world is wrong. And that's why God had to send, his son in the Christian tradition, or had to send a prophet in other religions, to show you how you are wrong and how the world is wrong. And you are immediately, I'm just going to stay with the Christian vein because that's how I was raised, you are immediately indebted to this God. Like as soon as
And
you come into the world and into this like shitty, terrible world, you're
and like
terrible.
that is such a like that's such a it's there. It's like it's right in the open. It's like rule number one: you
It's
are
the first.
unworthy and damned to hell. Got it? And then now you can go in the building, and that is it's like so hard. Like, look, honestly, genuinely, all respect to everyone and their personal relationship with religion,
Yeah.
but but exit the podcast now. But that should be a huge, like, electing a gigantic red flag. This just like, turn back now. If the premise of this entire movement, organization, family, whatever, is that you are wrong. I'm a former I'm a Christian kind of. I mean, I'm a former Christian in some regard, but like, I still kind of like worship music from time to time. And some came on the radio the other day, or my phone on a mix on like my playlist. And I was like, I like the sound of this music. But then one of the first words out of Phil Wickham, what's up, Phil Wickham? One of the first words out of his mouth was, Jesus, you bore all my shame. And I'm like, I can't get down with this, man. I can't get down with this. I was just going to jive with the tunes. But it's all built on that you are unworthy and unlovable and damned to hell. And it's not true, man. Sorry. Anyways, such an interesting beginning point for religion.
Yeah, so it's just such an aggressive intro into this worldview. And then the flaw with religious trauma is, of course, they set up this omniscient being that you now have to source from. And it's not an internal source, it's an external source. And so you're constantly having to draw from not you, you're incapable, you can't even walk without him holding your hand, but you're constantly having to draw from this external source. And then this external source is what other people tell you it is. So you don't even develop a relationship with God. Like, you develop a relationship with somebody who claims to know the mind of God, who generally is always a terrible person, because that's such an aggressive authority grab. And you only make an authority grab like that when you have no authority yourself. So
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
How do you get someone to consider that that's a red flag? How do you get someone to, I guess you shouldn't try to force anybody to wake up from the religion or anything, but like, how do you get someone to see that, like, yo, you are damned from the start in this thing, and that's a red flag?
I think what I have learned is it's less about trying to convince people of anything and more reminding them of their own capability. And also, there is a very gigantic flaw in the idea that God made you in his image, and guess what? You're a piece of shit. Okay, so then God's a piece of shit, right? Like,
maybe, maybe,
right?
Maybe God fucked up too, man.
If God is putting people here in his image, then you come complete.
Yeah.
And the thing that you want to do is create a personal relationship with God. The thing that you don't want to do is to think of God as other and outside of yourself and under the control of something else, and as someone that will punish you and attack you. So then there's this omniscient being in charge of the whole world that hates you and will attack you if you do anything wrong. And that's just so incorrect and sets you up for such a life of anxiety, and fear. The whole thing is fear-based if you view it that way. But if you remind people that, like, if you're made in the image of God, that means there's a little bit of her inside of you. That means that you have come with everything that you need, and all you have to do is bring yourself to life. So what is it that you like about yourself? What do you think is a godlike quality about yourself? What do you think is your gift? How can you bring that to life? How do you feel peaceful? And drawing people back to themselves will naturally have them start to detach from whoever has claimed authority over their lives, from whoever, if I'm trying to draw you out, if I say, start to believe in yourself and start to think for yourself, and you do, you are naturally going to clash with whoever has determined that they are the authority over your life. And at that point, when that starts to happen, is when I would again remind you, like, this person is not God, but you have a personal relationship with God. Like, go back to yourself, go back to your autonomy, go back to the God-given authority you have over yourself. And you don't need to be attached to this person who is claiming to be your access to God, because no one is the source to God. You are the source to God. That's it.
Yeah.
So how can we get people to like return to that knowledge and remembering that like we are all divine, and it doesn't matter what sort of label you want to call it. We're all drinking from the same stream with different cups, and we're arguing over what cup to use. But there is, yes, this divine source. And the unique thing that you have is the thing that you can start to attune back to that source. And that will naturally draw you away from these sort of charlatans that claim to be closer to God than you are, you know?
Yeah, the relationship that we have with our idea of God is one that's given to us by other people, and it's like most
Yeah.
it's like we don't think that we have the ability to, as grown-ups, then reevaluate it, because
Right.
we're still a kid in our thinking. We're like, there's always bigger people, grown-up people who know better than we do, and we rely on this like just idea that the larger group of people have kind of collectively agreed that this is true, and who are we to argue with everybody?
Right.
So we never branch out and begin to, like you're saying, a beautiful thing of begin to listen inwards to find the voice of God, instead of going into a book or listening to a teacher, pulling away and getting quiet. Because if you close your eyes and you get real quiet, whatever you learn about God in that space is so much more valuable than anything you could ever learn from someone else's words.
Truly, truly. And I really believe that the spiritual journey is a journey of archetypes, you know? So it's like the hero's journey is an archetypal journey, and we can all take it. The prodigal son is an archetypal journey, and we can all take it. So many of these stories, I think, are not describing the story of an actual event that actually happened. You know, it's an archetypal journey that
What do you
is
mean?
shown.
I know archetypal in very like, I know a guy who knows an archetype. Like, I know it vaguely, but I don't you know.
Let
I
me
mean,
Google the definitions that we're all on the same page.
yeah,
Okay.
Jamie, pull that up real quick.
So an archetype is a very typical example of a certain person or thing. So, for example, the archetype of a genre. So you can say like the genre in the genre of fantasy.
Yeah, like I know that archetype typically means, like, archetype's the same thing as the southern word "ol." Like, that's just a good old woman or man. Like, that's just a good old brother. Like, that's just a typical thing. But you also have archetypes, like from what you're saying, the story, the archetype of like the Joker or the hero.
Like story. So let me see. So for example, in the archetype, this is always very simple. So I can do the archetype of like the typical mother-in-law.
Yes,
Of like
yeah.
tapes that everyone hates, and you immediately get this thing in your mind and you understand the character comes to life because it's the mother-in-law archetype.
Yeah, or
I can talk about like the wounded
a
child, and everyone will sort of understand, you know. Or if I say like, oh,
I got
Braxton,
your
you're such
audio
a knight
is not coming
archetype,
through right now.
you
I can't hear
immediately,
you.
then people will understand a little bit of your personality a little bit more. If I say, oh, he's kind of a, you know, he's kind of a knight,
I
or
can't
he's
hear
kind
you right
of
now for some reason.
a fool, or he's kind of a, you know, it's like these
Can you
sort
hear
of
me?
archetype things. So I think when it comes to spirituality and how I view these things in the Christian faith, or in other faiths and other, I think it's all fables. And even, you know, the story of Snow White, or the, you know, the princess archetype or whatever. It's like,
Can you
what are
hear me
these
right
stories
now?
teaching us about energies? Your mic is not, I can't hear you.
We're back.
We're back. That was a fun
Are
little
we
journey.
good? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
All right. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Okay, so you went on a tangent. You went on a tangent about archetypes, and none of it.
On archetypes, but I'm saying that in the journey of archetypes, and especially in like the Christian faith, I think that all of these things are very useful stories that are given to us for us to use in our journey through life. So like we need these
Yeah.
stories, we need these understandings to help us navigate the many, many different types of scenarios and energies that we'll run across. But the way that it's taught makes us, it blinds us to the actual wisdom of the teachings, you know?
What do you mean?
So
No,
in
I don't.
that way, so for example, I'm trying to think, like the journey of the prodigal son, where, you know,
Like
he,
coming back to Christianity is the point of the prodigal
yeah,
son. Like that's the
that's,
point of the prodigal son.
that's the point of the
We're like,
whole thing.
yes, come back to Jesus.
Yes. Leave in the first place. Because if you leave, you're going to lose all your wares and da da da. So you should just not leave in the first place. You should just stay with Jesus. And then,
Yeah.
you know, the other people who are leaving and having a good time, it's because they're still in their hoe phase of the prodigal son journey, but they'll come back, you
Ah.
know. So it's used as a means to control, as opposed to how I see it now in my journey of the journey of the prodigal son is sort of is a spirituality where like I leave the cult, I leave Christianity, I go into the fray and sort of explore and learn and find all these things, and I end up back at a very deep spirituality, which is so welcoming and welcomes me back, even though I am a different person and it is the same source.
And
And
in a
so,
way, instead of saying that the group will always let you back in, so you should no. Instead of saying that you shouldn't leave because you'll lose your inheritance and squander it and have to eat like pigs, instead it's saying that you are able to leave, and when you return, you'll be welcomed back with open arms and love. So it's saying, go, leave what you know, leave what you believe to be true, leave what you're so certain of, scratch the itch you
right,
need to scratch, go and do what you need to do so that you can explore. That's your soul trying to go gather experiences. Go do it, because we'll welcome you when you come back with open arms. That's what the prodigal son story is saying. That's what you're saying.
well, that's what I'm saying is that's a different interpretation, right? And that interpretation that you just gave, and that that is a much more that allows you, if you read the story and get that, then when you are at that moment of questioning, you feel more free of like, well, I'm on the journey of the prodigal son. I'm going to go into this phase where I leave everything behind and I got to know what's out there. And it's like, you know,
Yes.
if you grow up in a small town, and you go to the big city and blah, 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 you might end up back at that small town. But this time it's because it's your choice and you've seen what's out there. You've realized how wonderful it is at home. And now when you go back, you're happy to be there and you know how valuable this is, you know,
That's a
and it's a
really cool
different thing.
insight.
Hmm?
That's a
Yeah.
really interesting insight, Angel. Seriously, it really is.
Yeah.
Because
But it's like,
that's
yeah, I mean, the way that it's taught versus what it can teach, I
yeah.
think, are two very different things. And when it's taught to you, it's taught um, under the umbrella of it, this is a high control thing. I want to control your behavior to save you from yourself because you're inherently bad, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, it really doesn't matter what path you take, right? The brother that stayed behind in the prodigal son journey, he didn't have a better experience than the brother that went out and came back. They both ended up in the same place, sure, but neither was right or wrong. It was just two
Yeah.
different journeys, and
It's
both were
interesting.
right.
It's so interesting when you begin to look at spiritual text and things like that as letters of love or encouragement to
Yeah,
anyone in any situation they find themselves in. Are you being patient and still and
yeah,
being diligent in painful situations? Here's love and encouragement. Are you deciding to fuck it all and break through it and go explore? Here's love and encouragement. But that is such a better, I mean, that's such a helpful way for myself to view spiritual text, not as
hmm,
an authoritarian, this is the voice of God telling you that you need to stay home with your
yeah.
father.
Well, I think that's the thing is when human beings get these a hold of these texts, they use it to control,
Yeah,
and these were meant to love and to help you create a safe space for yourself. And again, the issue is when a human being tries to get authority over another human being. Like
that's right.
that's just ridiculous. We all have the same capacity to self govern. You know,
How do you begin? You do this for work too? You do counseling with people through religious trauma stuff?
I don't. I did for a little bit, and I realized that that is not the thing that
Nice.
thrills me.
Nice.
And I created my courses and I have them live there. But again, I don't know what you need. I can just tell you everything that I know and hope that you find something in there that's useful for you on your journey. But I
Yeah.
really believe that there are parts of the journey that you can do with others, and there are parts of the journey you have to do alone. And a lot of the parts of the healing journey you have to do alone because you have all the context for that. And
Yeah.
there are things that we have been through that some of it we can say, some of it we can't say, and some of it is unsayable. And the person across from you will never know what you can't say and what is unsayable. And those are the parts that you have to walk alone. And a lot of this journey is you got to do it alone.
I'm writing that down. How can you encourage somebody to consider the idea that the voice of God is the one inside your head? The best connection you'll ever hear from God is it comes out of you inside of your awareness. It comes out through you. It doesn't go into you through someone else's mouth. How do you encourage someone to begin to grasp that idea?
So for me, it's about getting them into a state. Because like I can tell you all day, every day that like voice of God is inside of you. And if you never sit still and you never get into a meditative state and you're never open, then it doesn't matter if you know this, you know?
No.
I could be a marathon runner, but guess what? I'm never going to be in that state. So I'm never going to find out. So I think it's that thing.
I don't know. With your 20-mile thing, you might figure it out sooner enough.
I think it's also understanding that God or spirit or the universe or whatever it is, it doesn't talk to you in your thoughts. It comes to you in a complete sentence or picture. So when I talk to you, it's linear. I say certain words first so that by the time I get to the end, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And you kind of know where I'm going. You can kind of know what's coming and where I'm going with this.
Yep.
When spirit talks to you, it comes in one full statement.
Yes.
It's not linear. You cannot tell where it's going. It comes complete. And it is a picture or a feeling or a thought that comes fully formed. You do not form it. And that's the difference between like the thoughts in your head and spirit talking to you, is it comes as a complete thing. Spirit never comes incomplete.
Have you moved into a different phase of sorts of where you place spirituality? Like initially, maybe it was something to be discovered and something to first it was something to undo and make your own. And then now has spirituality developed a utility of sorts that doesn't place it as the further most important thing in your life anymore?
Well, so I think for a while it was definitely not the most important thing. I think the deconstruction of it was very important. And then there's just a few years where I just don't give a shit about spirituality, you know, and I'm going to do everything myself. And I found out about logical thought and a checklist, and by God, that's all I need. And it works until it doesn't, until you run into a wall and all your worksheets can't get you around the wall. And you realize that you got to dig under the wall or you got to go over, and which means you either have to go into something dark that you haven't been through before, or you have to learn how to fly. And those are your only options through the wall. And so now I've come back to this spiritual practice, and it is important to me, but heaven doesn't punish. So I am not stressed about my spiritual practice.
Yeah.
I'm not like, oh my God, I didn't meditate today. That means I'm not a spiritual person.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it's easy because I know that this exists. And for the rest of my life, it is such a loving and upholding divine force. And so I would like to be closer to it, but I'm in charge of that. It's not keeping track about whether or not I'm attending the meeting.
Yeah.
It's just there as open source. And whenever I want to tap in and have a better experience of my life, I can tap in.
So what happened when you started to think for yourself? What horrible things started to happen? What did you do when you decided to make your own decisions?
Wow. The first thing I did is I would not listen to music on my drives, because I would listen to music on my drives, like Christian music and whatever it was, just to keep me from thinking, because I was taught not to think. And once I figured out I can actually take an issue and think about it and spend time thinking about this thing, and I could sort it out, then I would just drive not listening to music, and I would just think and be like, oh my God, that means I can leave my house at like 4 o'clock and drive somewhere. And by the time I get there at 4:30, I will have more knowledge in my brain that is more useful than what I had at 4 o'clock. And so once I found that out, it was really, obviously so impactful. And I started to learn about like how I can start to create my own world. I can remember where I put things. I can read different things and then understand them. I can start to formulate my own thoughts and thought patterns, and I can start to look for patterns in different things and start to connect them. And this is what I thought everybody did. This is what I thought that when you went to school, they taught you this. So I would read like 2 books at a time and try and find, like, I would get 2 books on, like, I believe one of them was Sapiens and one of them was like how, so it was like a book on the human origins, and it was a book on how thought works. And I would read them side by side and see if I could pull out any patterns of like, this is the origin of thought and this is the origin of intelligent life, and is there any crossover? And I would start to find crossover.
Were you on LSD at the time?
But I assume that this is what, when you take LSD or when you take these sort of drugs, like what happens is like this huge like explosion and then connection. And because my brain had been on lockdown for so long, when it accessed thought, I believe it's like the same sort of feelings of like euphoria and understanding and connections across the board on multiple different levels. So it really, once I started thinking, other people started losing their ability to control, and then that was a whole thing. Then I have to go through all the psychological journey of walking away from people who are only in your life because you are controllable, and learning how to navigate that, and then being like, can I use, like, how much thought can I use to navigate away from this versus how much of my knowledge of humanity do I need to pour in order to navigate this? And then starting to learn how to blend those 2 things, and learning how to navigate not just logical thought, but also the human condition and also people's emotions, and starting to draw those patterns in. And from what I know of human nature and my experiences, how can I enter into this old pattern, but create a new outcome? And it requires different thoughts and all the knowledge that I have of the human condition and different nuance and behavior from me, which again goes back to like gamifying things. And then how can I move through the world, elevating myself and my life without causing harm to others, but definitely being able to navigate away from people who would harm me. So it's a very useful thing to be able to think for yourself. And I think it naturally carries you towards a better quality of life, especially when you have the courage to act on what you know to be true thought.
Have you ever taken LSD or any psychedelic substances?
Yes. No to LSD, but that will be, by the time this airs, it might have been a yes. Who knows? But I've done plant medicines, and that really has gotten me to deeper into the heart space, because I think it's like all head for a while.
What did you do?
Okay, so I started with ayahuasca.
Really?
Apparently it's an aggressive start.
Pump the brakes, dog. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
No way, okay. What? So wait.
Listen, we don't do anything halfway. We go all in.
Day one out of the cult, I do ayahuasca, and yeah. Wait. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. That's awesome, man. So wait, how did you start with ayahuasca instead of like some mushrooms or some like LSD?
I had done like a microdose. I had done like half a gram of mushrooms.
Okay.
And someone told me, well, it's plant medicine. Ayahuasca is plant medicine. So I was like, great. So it's the same. So
Yeah.
I had said yes to, and I had heard all sorts of things about ayahuasca. And the only reason I did it is because I had a very good friend who I trusted and I had known for years, and he invited me.
Where did you do it?
I did a private with just him and I,
Okay.
because I really, the things in group, like we did so many group things, obviously growing up in a cult. And we're all going to be together. I was like, I've one and done. So
tell me about your ayahuasca experience.
It was really, really beautiful. I didn't know what to expect, but I think, and this is my thing that I will tell everybody who's on their healing journey, is you have to be very unafraid of what you're going to see before you go in. And if there is any part of you that is afraid of what you might be shown, don't do it. Because I know that it was a good timing for me, because I felt very healed from all the stuff that I had been through. I did understand already that everything was as it should be. And so when I went in to meet with the medicine, I didn't expect anything. I just told it, whatever you want to show me, I want to see. And everything is welcome, and I surrender. And one piece of advice that the shaman gave me, my friend gave me, as I went in, is he said, if you try to fight what it's showing you, it's going to hold you there and you'll stay stuck. So when people have a bad trip, it's generally because they're fighting what they're seeing. And so it keeps you there.
That's true.
And so he said, if there's anything that you don't want to see, or if you start fighting it, you're going to have a bad trip. So just let yourself go into it, and it'll keep moving you. And there was a point where I thought that I won a battle, and I did. I won a battle. And so I was like, great, amazing. And I was on a bird, and it was beautiful. And then I saw this like pile of darkness. And I had already had a battle with the darkness, and I had already won. So I saw more darkness. So I steered the bird. I was like, let's go fight it, because I know I can win. And so I went and I started fighting it, and I started losing. And I started like panicking a little bit of like, no. Like, I win this. I've already won this. Like, you're supposed to let me win this one. And I kept on getting like farther and farther into it. And it started like overwhelming me. And then I remembered what he had said of like,
don't fight it.
To let it win.
Yeah.
And so then I just had to make the conscious choice to like, okay, I can't win this. I'm just going to go in. And then everything went black. And you just have to go into the surrender. And then of course, because it's ayahuasca and like the spiritual journey, like the life journey, it's constantly moving. It moved me out. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I mean, because it's just like life. Like, we're not trying to win life. We're just trying to continue on with it. Yeah. And there is no winning. We were never going to win in the first place. Whatever battle it is that you're fighting, you're not going to win it.
That's such a for anyone listening too, that is such a good reminder always with any type of psychedelic or drug experience period, is that, especially psychedelics. I mean, like, you know, if you've done tons of cocaine all night and you think you might die, my friend. You should go to the hospital. But if it's a psychoactive substance, if you've eaten mushrooms, if you've tested your drugs that you've taken, if you've tested everything for fentanyl, if you've made sure that what you're doing is safe, and then if it's psychedelic and you feel like you feel this horrible fear towards the thing that you're facing, just know you have two options, my friend. Be really fucking afraid and relax, or be really fucking afraid and tense up. And only one of those will get you through it. Let that shit go, man. Okay, so you do the ayahuasca. How intense was it? I've never done ayahuasca before.
Oh, really?
No, I've done a ton of psychedelics, but I've never done ayahuasca before. In my mind, it's like the The last final holy grail to get punched in the nuts by God. Yeah.
So I am. It was a very beautiful experience for me. It was definitely the most intense that I've been through with all the other things that I've tried as well. But
Were there
the
other
experience.
what other things were there?
I've done like mushroom ceremonies and then ketamine and yeah, things like that.
Was the ketamine in a clinical sense, or was it just recreational?
These are all in like ceremonial sense.
Okay.
Yeah, not for I don't really do the recreation. I like to do like sober. Like I really like to be out and about. I don't really drink, so I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Um, for me, it's still a new experience every time. I'm still like excited by it.
Yeah, I definitely
So
think you probably have the better hand in terms of approaches to these experiences, being in a ceremonial approach versus not. I just talked yesterday actually to a clinic in Austin, Texas, to see about
okay,
going and doing a ketamine assisted therapy session with their ceremonial approach. Because I've done a lot of
yeah,
ketamine, but I've never done ketamine. I've done a lot of ketamine in a personal therapeutic sense, like done ketamine, sat quietly, darkness,
yeah,
eyes shut, inward we go, but
okay,
never. So it's been ceremonial in that
right,
sense and respectful and intentional. And I've done
yes,
that with MDMA and psychedelics, but never like never in the sense of communion with someone else through an
right,
experience together.
yeah. I think it's important to do it in a ceremonial sense, and so doing ayahuasca was very impactful for sure. And I've done it a few times since. The first
How
time was the best one though, just because I went in. The second time was tough because I went in with expectation because I had such a good first one. Then with the
yeah.
second one, when it wasn't hitting as hard, I was like, "Where are you? Like, why aren't you giving me the thing?"
Compared to you said you did mushrooms and ketamine, compared to the two, how would you rank them in terms of intensity and difficulty?
None of them have been difficult for me, and I think that's because I don't consider things like I did my mushroom ceremony. I cried for 4.5 hours, but I don't consider that bad. Like that for me was fantastic. That was a great trip. I felt really good afterwards. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think in terms of intensity, like with ayahuasca, I didn't do it for the longest time because I heard those stories of like, well, you shit your pants in a room full of people and people are
Yeah.
chanting.
Yeah.
That's just the experience for me. But with the shaman that I did it with, he was like, "No, I've done it a lot, and there's a." He was like, "I've done it 7 times now where I haven't purged at all,
Hmm.
like no like upset stomach and no throwing up, and usually people at least throw up." And I think it really matters how you think you're going to react going into it. But I prepped correctly. And then also, he was like, the medicine is moving. Like, when you're in it, you're being moved. And he was like, so I think in the traditional ceremonies, you sort of get up and you dance or you're laying flat. And he was like, you need to be in like a reclined position
Hmm.
where you're like not laying flat because then it'll come up and you're not sitting, but you're sort of reclined. And he was like, and then don't move. And then when you feel a wave of nausea, if you exhale, it'll have a way to pass. Because usually if
Wow.
you feel nausea, you try and like, don't do it. And he was like, just exhale when you feel nauseous.
Don't fight
And
it,
so I
man.
two things. I reclined, I was just chill, and I saw this little square because I thought I wasn't going to go in because he was like, sometimes nothing happens. And it had been like 20 minutes and I was just listening to music, nothing was happening. And then I saw this little square and I thought, ooh, is that a square? And by the time I was done with that thought, it was just like, it had taken me out of my body and I was somewhere else.
How
Uh,
how transcendent was the experience in terms of being out of your body and unable to, like, you weren't oriented in your normal sensory percept?
um, I'm trying to think of how I can describe it. So I think what people are worried about is that you will not be able to control your body. And that was what I had worried about. Because I was like, if I'm in a group of people with a weirdo pervert shaman and I have no awareness of what's happening to my body, then how can I protect myself? And really, you can be aware. You can just open your eyes and you will be aware. Like, yes, you're high, but I think it's like being really, really drunk, which most of us have the experience of, where you are there, you are aware of your body. It's just hazy, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but you are still aware of yourself and what's happening. So in being in these psychedelic experiences, if you feel safe, you can just allow yourself, your consciousness to just go elsewhere, knowing that the body is safe. And if you ever need to come back, you can just open your eyes. Yeah. And it'll take you right out of the trip.
Unless you forget how to open your eyes. That was an intrusive thought that came up one time with the psychedelic trip, was like, I can always open my eyes. And then I remember thinking, fuck, how do you open your eyes? Where are the eyes? Where are the eyes?
I had an eye mask on and I opened my eyes and I couldn't see anything. And then I was like, oh my God, like, I'm blind. Like, it was crazy.
So
I mean, I think that these, I do think the worry is there for a reason.
Yeah.
Because it is something sacred. It is something not to be taken lightly. And it is something that comes with a cost. And sometimes the cost is your ego. Sometimes the cost is something else. But I think that you should go in reverence and being incredibly respectful of this thing, because it can kill you and it can heal you. And it's basically just you're giving unfettered access to parts of yourself that you may not know are there. So if there's any part of you that is afraid of yourself, or that you have not looked at or are slightly afraid of, you should be afraid to go in. And if you can go in knowing that you are a divine being and you will be met by divine beings and it's all love, and they are not trying to be harsh to you, then you will have a better experience.
The fear is important. It's like the prerequisite. It's the thing that is going to be transmuted into bravery and healing. You said it could kill you and it will heal you. You mean that like figuratively, right? We're not talking about death by Aya.
No, we're not. We're not.
So how would you would say ayahuasca is the most, it was the most like, I don't know, the most intense, and then followed up by, how would you do mushrooms and ketamine?
So I would say Aya was definitely most intense. And then I've had a mushroom and MDMA ceremony, like sound
together.
Ceremony. Yeah, together along with sound, and that would definitely be second, because that was definitely like.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Wild. And then I would put ketamine at the bottom.
Put a ketamine at the bottom. What'd you think about the ketamine experience? It was a ceremonial thing. How was it for you?
It was a ceremonial thing. I'm very one and done on ketamine, because it for me, and everyone reacts differently, but for me, what it did is it felt like it separated the side of my brain. So I couldn't, or it separated like my brain and my heart. And so I couldn't access thought. I couldn't put thoughts together.
Absolutely.
I couldn't access my brain to have it like form thoughts. And I just realized then that I would have to rely on the intelligence of my heart. And that was very upsetting to me, and then it made me realize how much I rely on my head. So, the lesson coming out of that was like, the heart has intelligence too. It's just different. And I block it because I am so much in my head. So it was a useful lesson. But I've learned it, and so I don't think I need to go back.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, because I could see ketamine. Maybe the research shows that ketamine, from a neuroplasticity standpoint, helps to rewire the brain for certain things. But like in terms of experiential, like ketamine has definitely has given me some very, very unique experiences in terms of the feeling of dissociation from thought, the body, etc. But never like meditating on MDMA or meditating on a psychedelic is
Right.
is like transformative and opening in a way, and ketamine just feels like I understand what it'd be like to be a broom.
Yeah. And so I feel like the other ones, like I feel like Aya and MDMA and mushrooms and everything, I feel like they are a more textured experience. And I feel like ketamine was a very sort of one note experience.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
it didn't feel as transformative or impactful. It was more like an annoying lesson. And, you know, and maybe it's me, maybe I was the one that did it wrong, and that's possible, more likely. But knowing also what I learned and how it affects me to go into like a ceremonial mushroom ceremony
Mm.
versus like ketamine in a clinical setting or even ketamine in a ceremonial setting. I know
Yeah.
that I receive so much from these other medicines. So I am working with those.
Quite interesting, man. I definitely look forward to doing ayahuasca at some point in life,
Yes.
and I don't know. Maybe it's not the obviously to be respected, but maybe it's not the
Mm.
beast that I have put it in my head that it is.
Yeah. I I think work through your preconceived notions of it, and also know that you're going to have your own experience of it. And
Yeah.
your experience is going to be based off of what you believe about it. So take other people's consideration less into it, other people's stories less into consideration, and more start to figure out your own thoughts around the thing.
Yeah.
And then once you do it, then we'll have a whole other
Well,
yeah.
yeah. I have to say, I really, really meant it earlier when I said you are a hero. You fucking rock. And I hope so much that people listening to this conversation together, that they'll feel inspired to not leave their religion or their cult or do this or the other, but to just generally look at your life and ask yourself, what's your relationship like with the divine? And is it one that feels serving? Is it one that feels beautiful and empowering? Or is it one that feels the opposite?
Absolutely. No, so true. Because your view of the divine is your view of your place in the world. So
Wonderfully said, Angel. Thank you so much for spending time with me today on this episode, and thank you to everyone for listening and checking it out. If you're listening to this show on a podcast platform, don't forget to rate it, and if you're watching on YouTube, yo, what's up? Click the like button and the subscribe button. That would be much appreciated, and we will see you later. Anything you want to tell the people, Angel?
Keep moving forward. Wherever it is that you are, even if you are in the best place you've ever been, there is still something in front of you. So take a step forward.
Camp for the night and keep going.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.